I'm putting on my best Jusagi impersonation here. Using my choral PowerPoint theme. I wonder if I can do a Jusagi voice. Can I do a Jusagi voice? Action Man, the greatest hero of them all. By Vernon Crowe. No, that was kind of awful. Sorry, boss, if you're watching this. I should have practiced that beforehand. But in any case, Action Man, the greatest hero of them all. This is going to be an educational trip into the 90s for you all. So this is basically a little overview of what Action Man is. Action Man was an action figure who started in the 1960s and went through a various number of reimaginings over time. You can see on the left here, he started off as kind of like a regular G.I. Joe kind of thing, moving on to extreme sports and that kind of thing, and then full-on 90s extreme with all the cool vehicles and gadgets and things that you would expect from the 90s. And so the game we're going to be playing today is very, very closely related to this 90s Action Man. So it's very important that I give you an overview. So what actually is Action Man? So Action Man started in the 1960s. It was a British spin on G.I. Joe. An English company licensed the designs from Hasbro, and they tried to give it more of a less American style. So it was pretty much exactly the same as G.I. Joe, but with English uniforms and things like that. So he started off sort of like soldier, pilot, all military-themed things. But as time went on, he became a footballer, a lifeguard, things all over the shop. It wasn't just military. He became like emergency services and things just a bit more fun as well. A bit of a less harsh, edgy exterior. You can see at the bottom, there's a spaceman as well. There's a very big range of them. And so over time, Palitoy and Hasbro kind of added different features onto their respective lines, which the other company would then be able to use as well. So things like eagle eyes and voice boxes. One company would come up with it and be like, oh, we're going to implement this in ours, but since we're working together, how about you take it as well? And so it improved both lines for the better. But now we're going to move on to the 90s Extreme, aka the good shit. So in the 90s, Hasbro reimagined Action Man as a sort of extreme sports super spy kind of thing. Kind of like extreme sports James Bond, I guess. I'm not sure what his deal was exactly. I don't know if he worked for like an agency or he was just kind of like a lone wolf going about it. But he was a super spy. We now had an antagonist, Dr. X. You can tell it's 90s already, you know. You've got the X's, you've got the extreme sports. It was incredibly 90s. But Dr. X also had his own henchmen, so he worked with people like Professor Gangrene and Tempest. It's funny because you can see that they thought of another kind of fancy science person. Like, okay, mad scientist, Dr. Gangrene. Oh no, we've got a doctor. Open the thesaurus. Professor Gangrene. He's different, you see. And so now the figures, I was less about dressing up one action figure in a number of different suits. You would have very specific Action Man figures designed about missions with extreme themes. So you'd have an Action Man who could... he was like an infiltration Action Man who you could attach to a kite and you'd like fly him up in the air and he'd zip line down. It was very cool. There was like a photographer Action Man who would investigate crime scenes. I think there was like a ninja Action Man who was probably culturally appropriating a lot of things, but he did kung fu and he could like push his legs in and he'd do martial arts moves and it was very cool. They did a very big cross-media push. So there were a number of TV shows, one in the 90s, which I don't think I saw, and then one in the early 2000s, which was kind of my Action Man, I guess. Where he was an extreme athlete who got conscripted into a spy agency after he crosses the dangerous Dr. X. And Action Man discovers he has sort of like a sixth sense, which lets him do extreme sports to save the world. It's very cool. Very 90s. I like it. There are also video games and magazines, which is relevant because we're going to be playing one of said video games very shortly. And it's very funny because if you look up basically any history of Action Man, they're written by hardcore collectors of the vintage figures, and they do not like this Action Man. Not my Action Man, they say. It's very funny. Like, they'll have very in-depth chronologies of like the Action Man figures, and then they get to the 90s and like, oh yeah, these ones weren't successful, they weren't good, moving on. But they're old. I'm not. I'm very cool. I'm very hip and up to date with trends from the 90s. And so now, this was glitching out a bit before, but I'm going to try it again. I'll mute my Elgato output, there we go. Because we're actually going to watch some ads from the 90s and 2000s, which show off the different Action Man figures. And it's very fun. Oh, I was so happy when I found this, because it felt like it unlocked some very old memories of mine. Please enjoy.
Action! Dr. X escapes, but 3-in-1 Roller Extreme Action Man is in hot pursuit. 1.
Oh yeah, Roller Extreme.
2. Street Luge action for flat.
Street Luge.
Wheel firing grappling hook for awesome abseil action.
Like, you can already tell how 90s it is with the rollerblades by themselves.
Action Man! The world's treasure has been stolen. And real photos are needed.
Hi Zakuichi, you're just in time. I'm teaching everyone about Action Man, an Australian and UK phenomenon, which I don't think caught on in much of the rest of the world. But it's extreme 90s, and it relates to the game we're about to be playing. So we're watching some ads that are very, very 90s, early 2000s. I think I actually had that photography one. It was very cool that actually had film built into it, and you could actually take photos with it.
Grab your X. Action Man Ocean Mission. Dr. X turns up the heat, but Action Man Bowman has him in his sights.
Oh, I don't think I had that one. I don't think I would have been trusted with a bow and arrow. That would have ended up in somebody's eye.
Action Man Bowman.
God, I love the 90s.
Dr. X is trashing treasures.
Oh no, he's trashing treasures in the museum. Oh, Ninja Action Man's here. Oh, hell yes. I love that for this they made it so that Dr. X was destroying everything in the museum instead of trying to steal it and sell it. Maybe Dr. X was actually like protesting against the colonialism of the museum. Maybe we should have just heard him out. Oh my god. Oh, he's got a motorcycle. Oh, hell yeah.
But Action Man's high-tech gyrocopter has got X in its lights.
Oh my god. I don't think I had any of the vehicles for Action Man, but I had plenty of figurines.
Evil's a one-way street. Action Man's gyrocopter.
Yeah, that's true. Dr. X could just be like lashing out. Oh god, that brought me back. Oh, I forgot to mention it before, but there was also an Action Man live show at a theme park in Australia called Wonderland, which is kind of like our Six Flags, I guess. Probably the closest comparison I could think of. But I remember there was an Action Man show, and he would pick someone from the audience to come up and help him fight Dr. X. And one day, he picked me, and I got to be Action Man's sidekick. And so he gave me the special air horn, so that when I saw Dr. X come onto the stage, I could hit the air horn. And that would tell Action Man he was coming and he could fight him. And it was very exciting. And so now I've got another quick video. This is the theme song from the 2000s Action Man show. And I didn't know this at the time, but when I was putting together the PowerPoint, I discovered this was actually written by Paul Gordon. That name might be familiar to you because he was the one who handled the music for the Digimon dub in English. So all those really cool songs and that sick-ass movie soundtrack was all thanks to him. And so he actually did this song as well. So I will shut up and let you listen to the song of my people. Just imagine I'm headbanging right now. greatest hero of them all. That was the tagline that they adopted in the 90s, and it was to be in all the ads, all the games and everything. It was very, very cool. So then what happened to Action Man after... Oh, hang on. Don't play again. Go to the next... There we go. So what happened after the 90s and early 2000s? Well, Action Man went through another reimagining under the Atom branding. This stood for Action Teens on Motorcycles. And a lot like other franchises who decide to throw people onto motorcycles, it went through a bit of a dip in popularity at this point. I was still into action figures and things at the time, but I remember just looking at this and thinking, oh, where's it all cartoony now? Where do they all have cars? I just want Action Man to do kung fu. And yeah, I wasn't that interested, and it didn't seem to actually last around all that long. Oh, so Zakuichi, you actually know Action Man. Oh, that's so cool. What country do you live in, if you don't mind me asking? Because whenever I talk to any of my American friends, they never seem to know what it is. So I'd be very interested to know how you're familiar with it, because that'd be very cool. So yeah, the Atom line didn't seem to last very long, and then Action Man kind of went dark for a bit. There was apparently a movie in the works. Talk around that started, I think, 2012, Wikipedia said. Haven't heard anything about it since, and I'm not sure if that'll actually end up getting made. Since then, there's also an anniversary line of Action Man figures that they've done for some of the key anniversaries. They've always tied into the vintage lines, so yeah, mostly soldiers. Oh, Peru. Oh, that's really interesting. But it wasn't that popular. That's a shame. He was really big. I lived across the UK and Australia during my younger days, and it was very big there. Oh, Action Man was way better than Max Steel. I remember getting into a fight with other people about which was cooler. And Action Man was way, way cooler than Max Steel. I got really angry at Max Steel because my friends tried telling me he was cooler. But Action Man was the greatest hero of them all. So Max Steel is nobody. So these anniversary line of figures mostly tied into the vintage theme. A lot of soldiers, a few footballers and things like that. I really wanted a re-release of some of the 90s stuff, because that's what I grew up with, and I would definitely throw down money for that. But one thing I did really enjoy recently, IDW did a line of comics. They started with the Transformers and G.I. Joe stories, which they ended up crossing over with a lot of other Hasbro properties in an event called Revolution. So this tied in a lot of Hasbro properties, like G.I. Joe, Transformers, Mask, and Action Man. Like, I was really surprised that they actually threw in Action Man, because I didn't think a lot of people knew him. And fun fact, Gem and the Holograms is technically canon to this shared universe as well. So when Megatron was subjugating the human race for a few years, Gem and her band were around in the background doing their thing. And so there was a really good limited series for Action Man, which introduced a new Action Man after the old one died in action, ironically enough. And that was a really good story that kind of reintroduced Action Man for a new generation. And then he teamed up with a few other characters in the Hasbroverse in a series called Revolutionaries. So I'm trying to remember who was in it. I think it was Action Man, Cup from Transformers. I don't think it was Rom, was it? I think there's a few G.I. Joes on the team. It was very cool in any case. But it all led up to some really big events where Action Man fought some of the big Hasbro baddies. Like, actually, no, Cobra Commander was dead at that point, I think. But he went up against Dr. Mindbender, I believe. And also a big team-up of Hasbro villains in a later event, which was led by the original G.I. Joe, who turned bad because he didn't like the Transformers. So that was pretty crazy. And there was a new Dr. X and everything. It was very cool. I very much enjoyed that as a fan of Action Man, because it incorporated bits from the vintage line and the 90s, 2000s stuff. So I was very happy with that. And I think that's the end of my presentation.